of a kind. Only being.
First of all, I have to tell you, I can't wait to see it because this speaks to me and to so many of my friends who've had the same struggle, and everything that I've read on all of the blogs, every parent seems to feel this way. You really hit, this film's really needed, and thank you for doing it.
You're welcome. We're glad to be part of it. It was a great experience for us, and we're just anxious to get it out there so more people can see it.
I know. We're anxious to see it, and I know that we'd like to do a screening down in Tampa. And
okay, super.
What got you involved with students with disabilities or students using augmentative communication? How did you decide to make a documentary about that?
Well, the mission of our company is really to work with nonprofits to try to tell their stories. And so we had worked with CARE out of New York and the Nature Conservancy and done a lot of international productions. And a local nonprofit called the New Voices Foundation came to us, and they were kind of a startup nonprofit with their goal, which was to try to help children with multiple disabilities receive a better education. And their idea was to open up a training center, really, and do it regionally, like in 5 counties at a time throughout the state. But it would be a place for children with multiple disabilities, cerebral palsy, and the like, to come, be evaluated by a professional team of therapists, and try to figure out what would be the best way these children could learn and also communicate with the rest of the world. And then they would move these children back into the public school system with a plan, and also they would support the public schools and their teachers to try to train them to be able to implement that plan.
That's great. Wow.
So it's a great idea, and so they came to us, and as in a lot of nonprofits, they needed some way to tell their story to raise funds. And so a lot of times we do like 10, 15-minute videos for nonprofits to help with fundraising or recruitment or education. And so we said that fits perfectly. We can certainly do that. And the more we got into it, the more we realized that these children were really invisible. Susan and I had never had any contact with a child with cerebral palsy. The more we researched, we realized that most people, probably the contact with these children are rare. There's a lot of parents and children who get frustrated inside the public school system, and then they go to be homeschooled, and then they're either further detached from society. And so we pitched the idea to them that on top of the fundraising film, maybe we should do a documentary that's just to the general public that says, this is going on. It's an important story. There's a lot of children like the 3 that we were going to focus on. And to get people to change their idea and about what these kids can do, their potential, and just change judgments in society. And they loved it. And so we went about shooting the 3 children, Josh, Colin, and Kay. They were all different ages. And so we kind of shot both videos at the same time, but the goal was to make a shorter version and then a longer. It's an hour-long documentary following these 3 children over a 2.5-year period.
You really must have gotten to know these families like your own.
We did. We love them, and it's a special bond with them. And it was really by accident that it turned out to be 2.5 years. We started production in 2007. Josh was just turning 6. Colin was in the 3rd grade and just turning 10 years old. And Kay was starting her first year of middle school at
hard for anyone.
13, I think. Yeah. Very hard. Great. Started on the fundraising film first because they needed the money to start raising money soon. And of course, 2008, the recession hit. And all nonprofits had a hard time raising money. They still are in this economy. And so it was put on the back burner because there was the funding just ran out for editing the full documentary, and we did a couple other projects, and we finished the fundraising film for them. But after a while, Susan and I said, we've got this story here, and it needs to be told. So we went to New Voices and says, let us finish it. We'll own it, and you don't have to break pain. Because we just feel like it's an important enough story to get out there. So it took us a little while to get the story together and edit it. And then we realized, well, you know what? Our filming started in 2007, but here it is at the end of 2009. We should go back and see where they are. And we had already kept contact with them, but we hadn't brought the cameras in really to see where they were. So we did, and shot another couple of months showing what had happened 2.5 years later. So it was a blessing in disguise, really, because it does give a fuller picture of what.
Absolutely. We
would usually pick a day out of the week to spend with each child, and it would, like in 2007, it probably went over a 4 or 5 month period, and then in the 2009, we kind of went back for a couple of days. Just to see from their moms and from them where they were. And the moms have a big voice in this film because it's a lot about, how much they fight for their children every day to get them what they deserve. And so, Colin, it's true.
Yeah.
And Colin had limited speech, mostly used a augmentative computer to communicate.
And he did use a head pointer?
Head stick, and he's really good at it.
I saw that because that's hard.
It is very hard. It's one of the therapists said he could go on tour because he's really good at it for so young. Josh just had yes, no, and then Kay had a little bit of speech, but was very good at typing out. She didn't use her augmentative device very often. She usually used speech when she could and then would write out things. And so the moms did have to play a big part to tell a little bit about the story and what the struggle was. So
especially when they're kids and they may get nervous.
Josh, the youngest, he's in a class that is labeled TMD, which is trainable mentally disabled, which is a term.
I know, I hate that term.
In most cases, it's been deleted from classroom and text, but it's not a fair name at all. But they were still using it and working on it at the time. And so he was really probably in a classroom with about 10 other students, some autistic, some with Down syndrome. So he wasn't with typical students. Colin was in 3rd grade, and he had homeroom and specials with typical kids, but he spent probably 2.5 to 3 hours a day with one-on-one instruction, which is pretty good given the budget crunch. And the therapists and the experts we talk to say it's proven that kids learn better when they're around other children who they can see are learning quickly and also struggling to learn. That there's a chance to kind of feed off all the other children in the room to learn.
Absolutely. And I think the studies are out that the kids that are typically developing do better as well. The test scores go up all around. So this fear that some parents have that, oh no, my kid's going to be held back, that actually isn't really true. And
that's right.
So what were did you notice any big changes over the 2-year span with the kids? Was there anything that really jumped out at you or that?
Well, for sure, because they all had different, ways that the communication was harder for them or how mobility was harder for them. So in Josh's case, the young one, he had been doubted his whole life, even though he was 6, by all the therapists, by Dawn will say, his mom say, by family members, if he was even there, and that she may be wasting her time. And you could see him being in the schoolroom, in the classroom, and the TMD class, the actual person leading that class was not really certified to run that program, that classroom. So you can see that they're doing things, and we didn't know because we weren't knowledgeable about how to educate children, really.
Right.
What the best way to engage them. So when we were shooting it, we were videotaping it, but we weren't really sure if that was the right way or the wrong way. But you could see that he wasn't engaging with them. Mm-hmm. And when we took him to the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies at the University of North Carolina, run by Dr. Karen Erickson, they spent a couple of days with him, and you'll see in the film, when you have people there who know how to do it, all of a sudden the child is totally engaged.
Totally different.
And he's making choices out of 7 or 8 options. He's being consistent. It's a totally different child.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that comes out. And then what happens, though, 2.5 years later, is that you see the public school system still doesn't quite get it. And the mom, Dawn, has taken him for private speech and physical therapy outside the school system. Mm-hmm. And he's getting a lot better with, he has a yes-no with his head now.
That's
and
great.
he has a button they can use for the computer. So he's doing better, but it's a lot of the work of Dawn taking him. In fact, we have a scene that we had filmed in the classroom with Josh, and they have him playing cards, which is not really educational, but they ask him, you can tell he's not engaged, and the teacher asks him, there's 4 choices, and she lifts his hand and says, are you happy or sad? And lets go of his hand, and so he chooses one of the other 2 that she didn't ask, which is, I'm angry, and he hits it with his hand. And the teacher just doesn't see it because it wasn't one of the 2 options she had. And so he just gives up and he just kind of leans back. And
that's
we have a voiceover from Dr. Erickson saying, sometimes people, and all, whether school teachers or anybody, they're not confident in their interpretation, so that she didn't see it. And so, yes, it's you can see the child. When they were with the center, Dr. Erickson's staff, it was totally different. And you had asked about what had changed. I'll go on to the other 2 quickly. Colin, 3rd grade was tough because testing becomes such a big deal in 3rd grade. And he was starting to fall behind. So when we caught up with him 2.5 years later, he was in middle school, and they had already taken him on a track where he wouldn't be able to graduate high school. And of course, his mom was crushed and was still trying as hard as she could. Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell somebody who's just starting middle school, oh, you're not going to graduate high school. That just seems a bit unfair.
Yeah.
And so the New Voices Foundation, the nonprofit we worked with, and the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies, were working with Colin after school to try to bring his literacy skills back up.
That's great.
And Kay, the final child who was older, she has speech, and she wasn't, by this time, included in most of the middle school classes in 2007. She was straight A's. She was very smart. And so we caught up with her in high school, and, she still has a lot of problems with, peer pressure and kidding at school, but most kids, it's almost like a new battle every school year when it starts out. The teachers aren't sure about her, and they're afraid what might happen. And then by the 3rd or 4th month, Kay is proving them all wrong. She's, and the kids start to realize when they see the grades that she has straight A's, and it changes the dynamic in the kids.
I loved what Kay said. It's like every time I start a new school, it's like a bomb goes off, or they think they do, which is true. And the kids all use Dynavoxes or Key or did they any of them use iPads or?
No, not they didn't. I think they're starting to use that a little bit more now. Dynavox was what I think that was the one. At least I know he used it for a while. What Colin used, and Kay is now to the point where she pretty much uses speech in the classroom and then types out papers and answers.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then Josh is not. He has tried several, But, that's part of the story too. Usually the school system will say, okay, Josh, here's one. And if he can't show
I know.
confidence in the device within 4 weeks, they take it away.
Yeah.
And 4 weeks is just not long enough. And so he was wound up having a device for 4 weeks and then taken it away, and they give him a whole new device for 4 weeks and they take it away. And so it doesn't work.
No. It's hard for kids if you don't have your parents advocating for you. Almost impossible.
Yeah,
really.
That's exactly right.
One of our big things, and it was in the movie again, Wretches and Jabbers, is that presume competence and presume that of everyone. It's the least dangerous assumption.
Right? Yeah.
And it is. You notice the difference in people that have had skills and lost them, and then are nonverbal, but they're still presumed to be competent, like Stephen Hawking or the man. Have you seen The Diving Bell and the Butterfly?
No.
It's about the French, I think he was editor of French Vogue, and he had a stroke and could only communicate by moving his eye. But because he'd had those skills, it was still assumed that to keep searching and finding them in there. I know there's no easy solution to what we can do to help kids that happen to communicate differently or have different physical issues, but any suggestions or?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It was funny you mentioned the least dangerous assumption because that was almost the title of the film.
Really? I love that. I love that. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to describe, really, what it is and get it across to people. And so we went with proof because it seemed like all these children, the one thing in common was they were always having to prove themselves over and over and over again. And Dr. Erickson says in the film, there are no easy solutions to this, but that if we can learn ways to teach these children, we'll be able to learn ways to teach all children who struggle better. And it really takes a change in your first assumption on these children to really think that they are in there. Yeah. Because if you think they're not, then like the least dangerous assumption, the damage is already being done. Mm-hmm. And if we can start changing that, then it would certainly help. How to change education is a big topic in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
Education, but I think there's a movement to try to individualize it a little bit more, to make it so that it's not trying to fit everyone who's a different shape in round holes into square shapes kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That if we can individualize it, then we're going to do a better job of educating all children. Right. The minute that we start trying to make cookie cutter and just try to make everybody fit into the same shape, it's not.
It didn't work for anyone. No. We actually have, today's the first day we have a communication and inclusion specialist going to school with Henry from University of Syracuse. I think that the real thing is people don't know how to incorporate assistive augmentative communication into the classroom.
And it's hard. We didn't want to, in the film, to try to say all these teachers were bad. It is not an easy situation for them. So our goal was really to try to change people's minds about how much potential these children have.
That's
awesome. And a lot of school districts need more money. Some have the money and still aren't effective. So you just have to go school system by school system to see what it is the problem is and how to make it better.
And how can people get involved with New Voices?
New Voices Foundation.
Okay.
Org. And they're still trying to build that facility. Because of the economy and the low funds from donations, they still are working within individual school systems and just going in and working with the children and the teachers in the school system.
That's incredible, though.
It's great.
I mean, everyone should give money to this foundation because I wish we had something like that here.
Right. We're kind of in this business. It's because we like to go with nonprofits and learn about what they do and to learn about who they support and to meet these families. It was an educational experience for us and one we treasure. But we didn't really know what it was going to be like. And, Susan usually, who is in charge of kind of coming up with the interview questions and figuring out how the story's going to go, she'll say that she'll, if in a different video, say with the Nature Conservancy, we'd have people come down and we'd ask them the questions and we'd interview the whole thing, and it's an immediate communication of what the story is. And she came up with questions and gave them to the children, but it took us a while to figure out. We're going to get this piecemeal in a way. We're going to hear from Kay or hear from Josh a little bit, and the mothers are going to supplement that information, and then teachers are going to supplement, and then therapists are going to help it. And it just became, we learned how to, not only how the story was going to form differently, but also how to communicate with the children in a way. It was different for each of them.
Yeah.
But we learned a little bit better about how to do it. So it was a great experience.
And that kind of ties in that why it is hard for teachers, because every kid is so different. And if you have one kid with a communication challenge, you have one kid with a communication challenge, and it's going to be different for everyone. And
that's right.
So I'm not trying to come down too hard on the teachers at all, but I know it's hard. It just when you're the parent and you want so much for your child just to be allowed in the classroom,
right? That's right.
Just in the door. And, we really see this as a civil rights issue, too. That it's kind of the, really, these films that you guys are doing, Certain Proof, Educating Peter, Wretches and Jabbers, that educate the general public about this is so important, because most people don't know what they don't know. And they tell you how grateful, on behalf of all families that have a kid that does things a little differently, that we are to you and your wife, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. I mean, we say hats off to these moms and dads and the families, because it's a family journey. And in our, seeing how hard these parents had to work to just for the smallest thing was amazing. And their determination and their courage and their undying love for their child, it was breathtaking.
Many, many thanks to you for this film, and best of luck with everything. And I'll be in touch regarding a screening, too. That would be great.
That would be great. Well, we really appreciate you having us today, and thank you so much. We just want to spread the word.
All of the kind. Only being.